Avital Eusgeld, welcome to Jewish Money Matters. How are you? It's so good to have you on the show.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so glad we connected. We've become LinkedIn friends, although I have to say I've taken like a month hiatus, probably even longer. I've been traveling and I literally disconnected from social media. Not completely. I've been on Instagram here and there, that's like low-hanging fruit. It's like the easy, but the hardcore job of like LinkedIn and it was offloaded from my phone. So it really makes a difference. And I really enjoy not being plugged, I have to tell you.
I get it. I really get it. It's like the number one thing I'm hearing in September is, oh my gosh, I have not been on LinkedIn at all, and I'm
Oh, it's
making a
not just
comeback.
me. Oh, it's not just
No,
me.
it's like,
Okay, good.
yeah, I don't know why I'm
Good.
hearing it all the time, but I really am.
I told my assistant last week I'm dreading going back. I don't know what's gonna face me there.
I love that.
I'll
But
dip
yeah,
my
not
toes. I'll
alone.
dip my toes. I'll slowly. But anyway, it's been really, really good to connect there. Love your content. You have an incredible boutique branding agency. You're doing such beautiful job, HiPitched. Love the name. All about you're doing strategic thinking and design, branding. But you didn't come from the branding space. Now you're all about creative and you had a I can't remember. Did you have a career in venture capital, was it?
Yes.
So let's talk about
So
that transition. How
okay,
did we
perfect.
get here?
How did we get here? Okay, so born in London, now
Mhm.
living in Yerushalayim. And I'm one of three girls. My mum is one of three girls, and she has all of her sisters only have girls. So essentially, there was like a lot of female energy growing up. And as one of my mum was also, I guess, one of the first female stockbrokers on the London Stock Exchange. And
Ooh.
when you grow up with a mum like that, I guess you kind of obviously want to be the complete opposite, like many people and their children and their parents.
Mhm.
And so I said at age 12 at my bat mitzvah in front of 400 people that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mum. So I'm sure she loved that.
Mhm.
And we're still on speaking terms, so I think it went down okay. And I, around the age of 17, I decided that actually I did want more of a career. There was just a shift in my energy and what I was kind of doing in my final years of school. And
Did
I actually
something
thought I wanted
trigger
to
that
go in.
shift? Did something trigger that shift?
I did a lot of internships and work experience, and I realized that I had more of like a knack for business than I had thought.
You,
Um,
you liked being
and
productive like your
yeah,
mother.
I guess I just like hadn't, it's easy to write something off before you've really experienced it. But then when you're in your last few years of school and you do internships, I actually realized that I found it a lot more interesting than I had thought.
Mhm.
So I did, what did I do in that first internship? So I guess my first one was in law, and I really loved that. And then in my final year of school, I actually decided that I think I wanted to focus on politics.
Mm.
So I signed up to study politics and international relations at university.
Did the same.
And yeah, I usually the same. I remember we actually had that conversation. And before that, I had a really crucial point of whether I would go to Israel for the year because in the UK, they basically, I know it sounds really cheap to anyone outside of the UK, but basically the fees were around $3,000. And if you took that year out for any reason, be it gap year in general, be it going to Israel, they increased the fees to $9,000.
Oh my.
Um, and it was like a real, so most of my friends decided that they wouldn't take the year out and they would obviously take the lower fees and go straight to college. But I was like, I really need this year in Israel. And my mum was like, are you sure? And my dad was like, you have to go for it.
Nice.
And I ended up going for it. So I went to a place called Brovenders, which I think had a lot of academic women. A lot of the girls from America were going back to Yale, Columbia, Penn.
Oh, were they
And
Balshuvas or we're talking girls who grew
it
up in
was
an
just,
class
it
homes?
was modern Orthodox. It was modern Orthodox. And that's really where my background was, very B'nai Kiva.
Okay.
Um, and during that year in Israel, I guess like it was a real chance to embrace my Judaism and I became a lot more Orthodox. And I just didn't know what would happen afterwards because I'd signed up for university, not being at home, in a very secular place, and on college campus, the equivalent of what it would be like anywhere in America, basically. And I just wasn't sure how it was going to happen. And my parents said, listen, our daughters are not the type that stay at home. We really think the college experience is really important. But if you want to change, we'll back you. And I kind of went back and forth. And when I applied to the London-based universities, that's what most of the Orthodox Jews do. They stay at home in London. I was like, it just doesn't, I don't want to do this. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to go to a place called Birmingham, which is 2 hours away from London Drive, and I'm going to see what it's like, and I'm going to make it work. And basically, in the first week, I signed up to be like the Jewish president of the biggest society. It's the biggest Jewish society in the country. As this like, they had, I mean, I didn't sign up, I was elected, but I ran against three guys. I was like the only frum person, and also like the first woman they'd had like running for this position in 6 years. And the one thing I did was I spoke on the election night without notes. My mum, whenever she does public speaking, was always like, never speak with notes. So everyone else was like reading out of these cards. And I was like, I'm just going to do this note free. And everyone was blown away. So I was elected president of this Jewish society. And when I called my friends, they were like, are you nuts? Like, you're going to do this alongside college? And I was like, yeah. And it was crazy. You were cooking dinners for 300, 400 people on a Friday night. You were hosting a 20 people committee all the time. You were in charge of charity events. You were in charge of anything political that was happening on campus. And essentially, it was like
shlucha right there.
Exactly. There actually obviously is a Chabad on campus, who I was very close with, and they were really helpful. But I think it was like the first sort of leadership position I'd had, and I was managing people who were my own age. And that was also I had like the president before me that I was taking over said like, it's really difficult to kind of get them to respect you. And so I made sure that I did very funny things. Like when we had a group meeting every week, I made sure there was a hot meal. So everyone would want to be there because obviously students want hot meals. And I made sure like it was home cooked. And I called them all during the week being like, what's doing? How can I do better? Anything you need help with? And like, I really delegated, and it just taught me so much about leadership. And in that first summer, I applied for an internship in Washington, like pursuing the kind of political ambition. And it was mainly
Were you enrolled in international relations? That was what you ended up selecting as your major?
That was my major in politics and international relations. And in that summer, basically, there was a program that I'd heard about called Forum for Jewish Leadership, which still exists. And it took British students from the UK to America to intern. And I was like, this is fascinating. I obviously want to be doing this. But it was really focused on sort of the Ivy Leagues. And I was at a good college, but it wasn't like an Ivy League. Anyway, I applied and I said, listen, I'm president of the Jewish Society. It's the biggest in the country. And they basically interviewed me and were like, we'll make an exception. So I went on this internship and everything changed. First of all, it was in the day you did the internship, and in the night you met with sort of Senator Joe Lieberman, like incredible sort of Jewish figures that were proud about their Judaism, but also like very political, very, very kind of high up in the business world. And it was like, we spent this Shabbos in Kemp Mill in Silver Spring. And it was the first time we met sort of George Bush's Jewish liaison officer, and his wife wore a sheitel. And I was like, this can really work, this idea of like being this religious and also this successful, because I feel like in the UK, it's definitely there, but it's definitely more muted. Like you don't see people kind of wearing kippot and also as high up. It's just different. In America, it's a lot more possible, and there's obviously more Jews. And so I was just blown away by this program. And then in the internship itself, I was actually working for Hillary Clinton's 2008 fundraiser, who set up a new non-for-profit, bridging the gap between Democrats and Republicans. And the Americans have a longer summer than the Brits. So my program entered a month late, and it was also like startup city. There was 20 members of staff and 100 interns. The energy was insane. And it was like the early years of this non-for-profit. And I was like, this is incredible. How am I going to make the most of it? And they said that there would be a donor event. They wanted to basically do a citizen event and a donor event. And the citizen event was to get 1,000 people in DC to come and hear about the new initiative that the non-for-profit was launching. And I came on this program with 40 participants. And so I basically signed up all these British people to come to my event, and I won the competition, and the winner basically got lunch with the CEO, who's called Nancy Jacobson. We're still in touch today, very close. And I was like, so I see that I'm getting this award, which is like lunch with Nancy, and she's amazing. But there's also a donor event the night before, where like you literally have congressmen, senators, the biggest donors to the non-for-profit, all flying in for this event. And only 2 to 3 members of staff were going, none of the interns. And I just said to her, listen, you seem really busy. Let's not do lunch. Could I come to this event instead? And she was like, that's pretty chutzpahdik, but sure. So
But
I
it's
ended up
smart,
going to
so
this event.
we'll make it work.
Exactly. So she was like, fine. And I kind of thought it would be this situation where it would be a bit like Devil Wears Prada in that scene where they're at London, Paris Fashion Week, and they have this assistant in the background who says to the head of Vogue, don't ask this person about their daughter. She's just got out of rehab. Don't ask about the wife. They recently got divorced. So I just had all these random facts to read to her about all the guest lists. And I get there and she's like, Avital, network, like you've never networked before. And she just left me to do whatever I wanted, speak to whoever I wanted. I ended up, leaving the evening with George Bush's chief of staff's business card. I left with about 15 business cards, and it was such an incredible energy and really taught me how to work the room. I was just 18, 19. And I came back to my room and I was with this roommate and I showed her all the business cards and I went to throw them in the trash. And she was like, what are you doing? You're going to follow up with every single one and you're going to ask them all to go for coffee in the next month. So I wrote a follow-up, British girl from event, and, asked them all to go for coffee. And that was really sort of how it kind of all happened, and all that's how I spent the rest of the summer. And then at the end of the program, I was the person to be offered a full-time job. And they said, don't go back to college, take the job. And I said, listen, I've got to go back and do my second and third year, but I'll come back next summer, but you'll pay me. And so I went back the next summer and they paid me. And then I guess, like that. Then I went back to college. I led a political campaign in my last year of university. There was a member of parliament that was running and I backed her campaign. And then that was the end of college. And then I graduated. And I didn't take up the job in America. I thought it was great, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I went to work for the venture capital that you mentioned. I went to work for the Israeli ambassador in the UK. I sent a tweet saying I was president of the biggest Jewish society in the country to the spokesperson of the embassy. And about a month later, I get a message back being like, okay, there's a job opening in the economic division. We're looking for fluent Hebrew, a degree in economics, and 5 years work experience. And I was like, I don't speak Hebrew. My degree was in politics and I've just graduated and have no work experience. And they were like, great, you're hired. So I took the job.
Just goes to show that it's all the hand of God. Let me tell you right there.
Literally.
Forget the job description, people. Just go for it.
So I did this job for about a year and I was just like, this is amazing. It was amazing networking. It was a great energy, but I just was like, this isn't where I want to be. I really just want to be in Israel. And so after a year, I decided to make Aliyah at the age of 23 by myself. And yeah, I didn't know how crazy it was at the time. And I basically moved to Tel Aviv because that's where I thought more of the business side of things were. And I had 80 coffees back to back. At the end of every coffee, I said, listen, this was great. Who would you suggest I speak to next? Would you mind doing the intro? And that was really how I ended up working at a venture capital fund called Greylock, which is Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, his fund based in Israel. And I was head of value creation, really doing what I had done for the embassy, raising additional capital, doing partnerships for them, but now in the private sector. And whilst I was in that role, people kept coming to me in the portfolio saying, listen, who should I go to for branding? Who should I go to for my storytelling? Who should I go to for my website? And I was like, I'm 24 years old. I'm going to set up an agency. I've got nothing to lose. No one relying on me.
And that was side hustle while they're also paying a salary. You smart girl.
And that was how HiPitched came about. And that's where we are. And now I'm 31. So I've been doing that for nearly 7 years.
This is such a cool story. I did not realize it started as a side hustle. Very cool. So at what time did you decide, well, I'm taking this is solid enough that I could quit my job and really dedicate myself full time to this?
Well, actually, at the time I had told a friend of mine who had been working in marketing that she should set up a company. And I said to her, listen, I'm getting all these people coming to me and I have nowhere to send them. And she was looking for a job. And I said, don't go in-house, set up your own thing. And so she came up with the name HiPitched. And after a few months, I was like, giving her so much kind of deal flow, I was like, I want to be doing this too. And at the same time, she had realized that she didn't want to be doing it. And so I basically took over the company that I told her to found.
Wow.
And so she kind of, I guess, set up the initial bits for me. And then I basically carried on with the company.
Wow. And you don't just have Israeli clients, right?
No, so it's a global agency. It's
Hmm.
worked with clients in 8 different countries and 12 different sectors. So
Hmm.
it's been like really varied. And our first client was like $100,000 client, which was also a little bit wild. It was a fund in America, wanted to revolutionize what Jewish burial looked like. And they came to us looking initially for marketing. And I took the brief and I said, listen, this is so much more than marketing. What are you going to call it? Who are you trying to appeal to? You know, what's the core of the brand going to look like? And I took the price of what an American agency would charge and I undercut it slightly. And I said, pay me a retainer. It was about
Hmm.
$12,000 a month.
Hmm.
And you're going to pay me that every month for 2 years. And I'm going to
Hmm.
sit with you and create this brand from scratch. So that was really the first client that the agency really had.
Wow.
And that's how we started out.
That is an
Um,
incredible story right there, right? Because we always hear the
yeah,
story like you're bootstrapping at the beginning, but to land such a big client from the get-go, that's pretty bold. How did you even know? You said you found out what an American agency would quote them and just like underpriced a drop. How did you even know what such a package would look like?
I just did so much research. Like I literally loads of stuff was online about pricing and how these, you know, like if you have X budget, your branding agency should be charging you this much. And it was
Mm-hmm.
really kind of clear. And I just saw all the pricing and put something together, a package. I also hired them, someone that was an expert in Jewish land and
Mm-hmm.
burial, because obviously land is a very like competitive market, especially in the burial space, because
Mm-hmm.
there's not enough plots for how many people want to be buried in Har Menachot, and especially in Yerushalayim. And so I brought on someone that understood that as well. And I said, and I negotiated her salary. She's married to a rabbi, 5 kids, and because of me, she managed to get a house, like with the salary from this job.
Wow.
Um, and it was just like an incredible gig, and it really worked out. And that was really how like the company began.
That's
And yeah,
incredible. That's incredible that you were even able to
yeah,
bring her in under their budget and they were still paying you. That's
yeah.
amazing.
I managed to actually get them to hire her separately. I just didn't want it
Wow.
to be like that she was. So I made sure I negotiated her salary for her, and then I made sure they were paying her that amount, and then it was like a separate contract. And
Wow.
actually, when our part of it finished, she carried on. So she's been with them for about 7 years now, which
Hmm.
is wild.
That is wild. So there's so many pieces to this story that are, I don't know if you realize how untraditional they are in terms of even this last piece. I negotiated for myself and I also negotiated for her. I managed to get the client and quote what many people would be scared to quote. I mean, I'm saying for a woman, there are so many pieces of the story, right? I managed to tell the venture capital firm that I'm going back to, the original, the Israel, right? I don't have these qualifications yet. Here I am available for you to take me. There's so many things that people might hear and say, wow, a woman typically doesn't do that. I'm assuming a lot of that confidence and that risk taking, and it's not, maybe the word is not risk taking, maybe it's confidence and not fear of the no, and no, none of this like imposter syndrome that people talk about doesn't seem to be playing a huge part here. I'm assuming a lot of this came from your upbringing, from seeing your mother. I mean, you said she was one of the first stockbrokers in the London Stock Exchange, female stockbrokers. So talk to me about that, because it is an unusual behavior, number one, for a woman. And then in the more observant world, maybe even more so.
So I think that growing up, I didn't quite realize, how brilliant she was, in the sense that there was, she would come in on a Friday and cook dinner, like literally leave the office 2 to 3 p.m. and make dinner in like 2 hours. And
Hmm.
people would kind of come in and be like, Elisa, like, I don't know how you do it. And then like ask me about it. And I was like, well, what's so strange? And it was only really when I went to seminary and I realized, you would sometimes go to people's houses on a Wednesday night, Thursday night, whatever, and they would be cooking for Shabbos. And I was like, oh, people really prepare for this, earlier on. Not everyone leaves it till a Friday. So
Hmm.
that was like very interesting for me to see. And then when I was around 16, someone said to me, how does your dad, my dad's a doctor, by the way, but they said, how does your dad feel about your mum being the breadwinner? And I was
Mm.
like, what do
She
you
made more than
mean?
he did.
Yeah. And I was like, that's so interesting. Like I had never thought about it.
But one second, like how does a person even, is that, was that an assumption or is that something that we knew for a fact that mom
I
makes
mean,
more than that? So much that your
so
friend
first
would
of
know it.
all, it wasn't my friend. It was I was at a friend staying at a friend for Shabbos, and the father asked me at the Friday night dinner table.
Oh my gosh, that's
Like, and
awkward.
I was like, it was like I was like, I didn't know that was a thing. And I came home and I asked. I don't know, I was 16. I hadn't really thought about it. And growing up, I definitely didn't feel that she, like it was like that. I just knew they both had great jobs. I knew that hers was more out there and a little bit more, less kind
It's
of done
conventional.
and yeah, less conventional. But I didn't think about the salary discrepancy.
Right.
So it was like interesting once I kind of realized that. And I think they both installed just like a huge amount of confidence because my mum, as I said, was one of three girls, and they were sort of taught like the sky's the limit. And
Mm-hmm.
then, each of her sisters had only gone on to have girls, and all of my cousins, one went to Cambridge. Everyone kind of went out and just like did their own thing, and there was a lot of support. And because there was no men, like especially when we were younger and growing up, it didn't feel like that we were less. We had nothing to compare ourselves to.
Right,
So
right.
that was just kind of like this energy of like, someone's got to do it. Why can't it be you? Let's dream big. And so I definitely never felt like imposter syndrome or, only women at the table and isn't that awkward. I just was like, I'm what? Like it didn't really throw me.
I really love it. Now, given that your parents were so supportive and so encouraging of, and again, mine were as well, of a career and, be assertive and be confident and go for it, when you became more observant, and I'm assuming it means a little bit more observant than they were, or the way they, they raised you and the way they ran their home, did it did they have reservations, trepidation that you might now not live up to this type of, ambitious, assertive woman that they raised and assumed would come about as a product of their education? Did they fear that perhaps you becoming more religious would, kind of cut your wings, or was that not even a conversation?
That's a great question. I think that I would say that first of all, I'm one of three, and my sisters are 10 and 12 years older than me. So there was a lot of experience they'd already had with them. That was the
Wow.
first thing. One sister had dropped out of college really early. Another sister had gone out to be a teacher, had originally started in publishing, which was seen as like very prestigious in book publishing, and then decided that she actually wanted to be a teacher. So there was a lot of things that they had kind of gone through. And actually, growing up, the pressure really came from me, not from them. I
Mm,
was very cultured. I went to a lot of theatre. I read a lot. We all read a lot. But ultimately, it really came from me and not from them. They just were like, we want you to be the best you can be and be happy, and
mhm,
whatever that is, that's fine. And I think also they had heard me growing up speak so much about being a stay at home mum that there wasn't this thought of like, oh, Avital's going to go. And, I think once I finished the internship, they saw that first internship that we spoke about in America. They realized that, I was much more similar to my mum than anyone had really thought, and that I kind of had the same level of ambition. But until then, it
mhm,
hadn't really shown. And I would say a lot changed in that year in seminary, where I just really started to like lean in and to that level of ambition, which I hadn't really been exposed to before. It was a
mhm,
huge year for me in that sense, in my Judaism and in my kind of professional world.
mhm.
Um, and then I think the thing that they were worried about was that whilst I had become more ambitious and wanted to pursue sort of a professional career, I was also very passionate about getting married, raising a family, being a homemaker. I spent a lot of time thinking, how is it going to be? How is it going to be that I was going to be like my mum and have that level of ambition, but also kind of have that feminine side and be a
Mhm.
homemaker? Because I would say that even though she was a homemaker, like we would host Sheva Bracha for like 70 people, it was very much outsourced. It was, I'm going to come home at 7 p.m. and it's going to be done and the food's going to be there because I've ordered it in and the
She's a
tables are going to be
practical
laid.
lady. I love it.
She's a practical lady, but at the same time, I was like, no, I want to make sure and I'm going to do everything myself.
Hmm.
So I think that like we just had like a little bit of I wasn't exactly like her on the home side, and we also had like full-time help. And I really wanted to be the person that would be picking up my children, and that was really important to me. So I think, if I had to be honest, there was a lot of conversations of, do you think that husband exists? of
Wow.
someone that's going to really understand both sides of you,
Mm-hmm.
because it's really not going to be like an easy find. So that's what they were actually more worried about.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting that you brought it to that, because that was going to be that's one of my follow-up questions, was when it came to, now you're in Eretz Israel, you have a prestigious job, you're making a nice living, and on the side you have this amazing company that you're growing. You are doing your thing, and you might get the messaging from the world of shidduchim, like, tone it down, girl. Like, you're not going to find somebody like that. So talk to us about that interesting process. Now that you brought it up, that even your parents were a little bit worried, you're looking for a unicorn here. It's not going to be an easy find. Was that also something that you were facing from your friends, your people around your life?
So I think, like, again, great conversation. I think that for me, I was lucky that I was in that business world and I was meeting so many people. Like, everywhere I went, people were like, "Oh, I really want to set you up." Like, prior to
Amazing.
meeting my husband, yeah, like I went on 70 first dates. Like, there was not an issue of, thank God, like people coming my way. And I think what I learned through the process is just that for the right person, you won't have to tone yourself down.
100%.
So, and I just had this constant, no one ever, I never met a shadchaneh and they never said, "Oh, you're too much,"
Oh, wow.
or
Good.
like rein this aspect of you in. I just think there was like a common understanding of like, well, right, we're going to find the right guy. And I think I didn't feel jaded. I didn't feel down throughout the experience. I only started dating at 24 once I had moved to Eretz Yisrael. And then after that, it was like 3 years of kind of intense dating. And throughout the process, I had someone that I was very close with that knew me very well. She's based in Harnof. She's called Marissa Gross. And her husband had actually been on that American program. And he said, when you move to Israel, you need to meet my wife, because he'd been like a rabbi on the program. So I knocked on her door, and when I first moved, and she never really sent anyone my way. And
Mm-hmm.
then finally, when I was 27, she called me and she was like, "I think I found him." And I was like, "Well, it's been about 3 years and you've never really told me that you found anyone." And she was like, "Yeah, I have." And she sent me his resume, and it said that his mum was a PhD professor, and he spoke 5 languages, and he'd studied law in university, and he was studying in the Mir. And I was like, "Oh, okay, like this
I
is
get
my
it.
guy."
Another unicorn.
And when I spoke to him and I actually talked to him about how great his resume was, he was like, "Yeah, I based it off yours." Like, he had never,
We
he'd
didn't actually
actually,
have one.
he never had one. He's 3 years younger than me. I was the first girl he dated, or the second girl he dated. He never had to have a resume, and so he just, she sent him mine, and he was
Yeah.
like, and then she said, "Oh, send me back yours," and he just copied the four, and I was like, "I love your formatting. I love what you said," and he was
That
like, "I
is
just."
hysterical.
Yeah, so it was really funny. And yeah, like
I
he wasn't.
mhm.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, it's in. I think the thing I was thrown about was the younger bit, because I had always been, because of like, "Oh, she's so accomplished." People had
Right.
always been setting me up with older people. But for me, actually, like, I just was blown away. Like, he'd become really just by himself. And I, taught himself Hebrew, like, very much, like, and also had seen this woman as his mum, pursue, a career. She'd gone to Switzerland for a year, and, to pursue and actually like her career. And I just think he had seen a lot. And so I just kind of
He
knew by the
wasn't
second date that
intimidated.
it didn't even cross his mind. I remember
Right.
when I spoke to him about America and about the internship and everything in my business, he was like, "Wow, that's amazing. Tell me more." And I just was like, "Oh yeah, like, this is him."
It's so refreshing for me to hear, and I'm glad you shared it with the audience, that during the whole process, you never felt like you needed to dim your light or, tone it down. I find that's so refreshing. Again, I'm not in that Megillah yet with my children, and I actually met my husband in an unconventional way. So I never even had a resume. He didn't have a resume. I mean, we were set up, but I never experienced that kind of people talk about the process, and maybe sometimes not in very positive ways. I didn't have a negative experience, although I do have to say, culturally, as a Latin woman, I did grow up with several contradictions. One of them being, yes, you have to be super assertive and you have to go get it and you have to get the best degree and the best job. And like all of that was very much encouraged, right? And travel and da. And at the same time, there was like this strange, like, don't don't be too much in front of men, like tone it down, don't speak too much. There was like this expression in Spanish, like bat your eyelashes a little bit more, like, and I always felt I felt it was so hypocritical, and so contradictory. Like, can I just be myself? you know?
I think you're right. And I think the other thing is that, like, when we talk about reining it in, I think that to think that you're going to enter a marriage and not be, the real you, and feel that you
Exactly.
kind of, I remember this, I remember there was someone that I was dating, and I actually did get engaged to someone. And she said to me, this was before I met my husband, and she said to me, like, your wings will be clipped. You'll always kind of be lessening you to make him shine.
Right.
And I felt like that was such a sad statement. And it really made me see things so differently. And that was really kind of where I realized, I was like, I don't want to be reining myself in, like,
Wow.
I just know that for the real person, I'll never have to be like less than. And it wasn't about him not being a wonderful guy or not accepting me. It just was like, we were looking for different things. And I
Wow.
feel like that actually was like the biggest wake up call to me, because I was willing to do something and be, less than I was. And ultimately, I just was like, I don't want to ever have to do that. And for the right person,
Yeah.
I won't. So it wasn't like, the whole time I had this feeling of just like, it will be fine. But I would say, like, that experience specifically really kind of like, put me into place and was like, you really just need to rein it in, and like rein it in and stop worrying.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was again another brave. So you you broke off the engagement. Brave move.
It was a mutual agree. It was a mutual agreement, but it was 6 weeks before the wedding, and it was a really hard thing to do. And I would
But
just say,
it
like,
goes,
in terms of that, the other
yeah,
thing that, yeah,
yeah, and it goes
no,
back
I
to that
just think,
element of bravery that I'm seeing through and through. So speaking about bravery, brave topic, money, it is the topic of the show. It tends to be a taboo
yeah.
topic. Definitely, your upbringing, making a livelihood and making a fine livelihood is nothing taboo. Talk to us a little bit more about, what are some of the messaging that you heard around money? What are some of the lessons you learned from your parents? Because there seems to have been a lot, and there's possibly good ones. And maybe there's some that you are like, you know what, I'm better off without this, but share with us a little bit of the juiciness.
So I think that the one thing that I remember they did really well was that from about the age of 11, they gave me an allowance. I can't even say what they did for my other sisters, just because like they were so much older than me at that point. I never really asked them what they did, but I had this allowance, and they said to it was a really generous amount, but they just said, with this, you need to manage all the clothes that you want, your phone bill, everything that you'll need. I think even contact lenses were like included. And it was
Wow.
like, this is the amount you need to make it work. And I think that really taught me the price of things, how much things cost, going out with friends. And I really had like an understanding of just that sort of element of like what things cost. And that was really important. I would definitely do the same for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think, I remember there was like, I was quite young, and my mum was going to a charity dinner. They went to charity dinners regularly. And I was like, Ma, like, a lot of my other friends' parents that go to, they all go with a Chanel bag and everyone's really fancy. And she just was like, it's just not me. And she was like, it kind of just really taught me like the priorities, and they
Wow.
instilled in us so much drive. And I just found that like really powerful. They're not showy people.
She had the money to do it, and it
It's
just
just,
was
it just wasn't her. Yeah. It just
good.
wasn't her. And I think that I felt growing up, they just were very understated. And so I guess like the other thing that was really happening as I was growing up was that people were always coming to them, family, friends, knocking on the door, just being like, come and see you. And they would be talking to them, yes, about finances or about medical issues. But a lot of it was just about life advice. Like, we're struggling with X, this is happening, even with our kids. Or, like, something's really changed in our home for whatever reason, or my husband's looking for his next job, or my wife is, and they would just really come to them for that sort of wisdom. And so
Wow.
I didn't realize, again, like, how rare that was. But it's something that I just see as like very important. And it really also, I thought, saw a ton of women come to my mum, both in the Jewish and non-Jewish world, that wanted to enter that career. And she always made time for the coffee. She
Wow.
always made time to meet with them. If someone from the community reached out being like, I'm looking for an internship, she would always try and help them. So whilst I had seen my mum give back, I knew this was something that was really important to me. And when I moved to Israel and I met Marissa, who we spoke about, she was teaching in a seminary. She was actually also like the in-house shadchanit. And she said to me,
Mm,
listen, Avital, you're young, you're really religious and you're really passionate about your Judaism, but you're also running your own business. And most of the girls that are coming to my seminary are become a Balta Shiva, and they need to see that they can be really, ambitious in their professional world, and also that they can be strong in their Judaism. And will
mhm.
you start public speaking for them and giving over a course on how to be an Orthodox woman in the workplace, how to effectively network, how to land your first
Wow.
internship? And I just kind of came up with all these ideas, and then word got out, and I was speaking to more and more students.
Wow.
And in total, I've probably spoken to about 2,000. And
And you
this is
would
just
do it
something that kind of
for no pay, or you would do it for pay?
initially I started doing it for no pay, and then like I remember
Mhm.
like she was like, oh, send me the receipt, and I was like, no, like not for these, however many sessions. And then after that it got really busy, and more and more people started asking, and I was like, okay, it's like another source of income. But I found that it was like so powerful for these women to sort of see that actually it was possible to be really passionate about your professional life and also really passionate about your home life, and to talk about what it means to make sourdough and to make challah and to make muffins every morning for your children. And also right now, my kids are 1 and 3. So there's a lot of conversation about raising a young family.
Right.
And these are things that girls are very nervous about, this understanding that there's more pressure for them to work. And ultimately, they also want a family. So it's like, how are they going to do both? And
Mm-hmm.
so I give really practical advice, those sort of things. And at the end of every session, I say, listen, anyone that this really resonated with, feel free to follow up for coffee. And what I find so interesting is that I would say like every time, probably 25% take down my details and one follows up for the coffee. And
Wow.
every time that happens, I make the effort, because I'm like, if this one person has gone out there and not just said that she was interested, but followed up or asked to intern for me, I really, make sure that it happens. Not always the
Wow.
internship, but always the coffee. So I think
Right.
I just saw so much from my parents in terms of giving back that I really made sure that it was something that I would be able to do as well.
What beautiful role models. I'm so impressed by them and the home you grew up in. That's the perfect segue to your own home life, because if we're honest, it's a big juggling act. Little children, I mean, your mother and your father were very practical. They had the help, but they also had the means to have the help, right?
Correct.
And we can't be naive about the fact that not everybody starts off their career with, high paying clients and whatever. So sometimes there's a lot of hustle, and it's a hard balancing act. Not, but so what advice can you give to the ladies in the audience who want to have both, but maybe are feeling overwhelmed or are scared of what's the hurricane that's coming, which is good. And I always say to people, it's transitory. You also have a whole lifetime to build your business, by the way. Your children's life is not, you're not always going to have your kids at home. So sometimes we also have to keep that in mind too, not to get too carried away. And I'm talking to myself as well as you, like the overambitious people, right? And remember, we have a lot of years after they go off to high school or seminary or wherever they are to build these dreams. Not that we should put them on hold, but maybe we don't have to be so aggressive about them at the beginning. But anyway, what do you think?
I think it's a great point. So first of all, I would say that the single years really did me well, because in those years I sort of got a chance to really give my all to the business. Fly to New York. I flew to conferences. I flew around Europe. I went to conferences in Switzerland. Like, I really made the most of it. And I just said, like, my husband is coming. I know I will not be able to do this for long. Let's make the most of it now. And I think that really kind of made me go all in on my business. And I always made time to date. Like, I would never put the business before a date. But at the same time, it was either I was doing stuff for the business or I was going on a date. There really wasn't
Mm-hmm.
much else. And
Yeah.
then right before my husband, I actually went on a big ski trip. And then straight after that, I met him. So like, I felt like I really lived those single years to the full. That was like
I
the
love
good
that
thing in
message
terms of
right
that.
there. Can we stop
Yeah,
there right second? Because it's a very important message that you also could, just because you're looking to get married doesn't mean you have to put yourself on hold, right? I think if God is making you wait because he didn't find, he didn't send you your husband at 21 right out of seminary, that doesn't mean you don't go and pursue your dreams and grow as a person. You also need to grow as a human, and that, you're going to be even in a better place to find the person. So I think it's important to note that. And I agree with you. And I had a similar experience. But yeah, I want to ask about that. Did you financially, did you manage to save during those years and build yourself some financial runway? Were you good with money then as a single girl?
So I don't, I think, but I never bought anything that I couldn't afford. So I didn't
Ooh,
really understand the idea of like, putting stuff on a credit card. That I
that's
just did
already
not.
big.
Yeah, so I think that was really important. In terms of savings, I would say that like I was living alone and I was covering all of my costs. And I also, for the last year, rented an apartment which had 2 bedrooms because I was like really unhappy just living in like a 1 bedroom place. And I was like, I just want to make room for my husband. I want to be in a different area of Yerushalayim. And I
Wow.
put in, yeah, and I basically rented like a 2 bedroom apartment. It was like double the price I was paying before. And I was like, he's gonna come, he's gonna be here and it's going to be great. And it was really kind of like, I just had real emunah that it was coming, I think, and that really made a big difference. And in terms of just like, fine, I wasn't making so much that there was like so much room to put away. And I wasn't
Mhm.
thinking like that either. And I think I
Mhm.
was investing in myself. I was buying the clothes I wanted. I was going for the experiences I wanted. I was, booking the vacations that I wanted to do. And I just was living life, I think, to the full, but like not above my means. And
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
when I met him, it was one of the first discussions that we had because he still wanted to stay in the mayor, and I was like not expecting to marry kind of a Kolel guy. And it was really important to him. And the more we spoke about it, the more I realized that we both wanted it. But we came up with a plan. On our third date, we were discussing how is this going to practically work? Really, what does it look like? So he actually stayed in the mayor for another 2 years when we got married. So I
Mhm.
knew that it would be like I would be the main breadwinner,
Mhm.
or like the only earner as such. And then he did another year in yeshiva, even though he already had the law degree. And then we had like arranged a point that he would stop learning and he would do like a year and a half of it's called like a stage or a training contract to become a lawyer.
Mhm.
And at the same time, that amount I knew would just cover our rent.
Mhm.
So he's now at the point where he's just finished the stage and then he sat for the bar and he's just passed the bar. So he's now
Mazel tov.
28, I'm 31. But it's actually kind of like we've only really had a year of us both earning. The rest of the time, like it's very much been on my
Wow.
business. And also, we in the past, we've been married for 4 years. We have 2 children, 3 and 1, Baruch Hashem. And
Wow.
we've gone through him becoming a lawyer, leaving learning. We've gone through Corona. We've gone through a war. We're still in a war. There's been like a lot. And we neither of us have our parents or any siblings here. So
Wow.
in terms of like practical things, I think it's managing expectations.
Mhm.
So the thing about running the company is that my hours are sort of from 9 to 3.
Mhm.
And then in the evenings from 7 to 10 when I'm working with American clients. And when there's things that I need to do, which are like spend 2 days, let's say back to back in Tel Aviv, he covers me and he takes off the time from work and makes sure,
Mhm.
or he, works from home on those days. And he's incredibly, incredibly supportive of those things. But there's no cleaning help, there's no one, there's nothing. I manage the whole house.
Are
I
you
do all of
serious?
the cleaning, yeah. And I
I'm
think it's just,
I'm going to
um,
intern by you, okay? I need to
and
know how
I
you're
think,
doing
yeah.
it.
And I think it's just managing expectations. Like I may have grown up with full-time help,
Mhm.
but I understood that if we really valued him learning, that wasn't going to be able to happen.
Mhm.
Putting 2 kids through private gun, paying our rent every month for the past 8 months, he hasn't been earning anything because he's been doing the bar. And during that time, you're doing 12 to 15 hours of revision. So I think it's
Mhm.
if you really say that you want a husband to be able to learn and you're really going to be the breadwinner and you want to be a family and you want to be time to have time to be a mum, then you have to rein in what your priorities are and you have to manage those
Wow.
expenses and say, what is our money really going on and what is like a luxury versus a necessity.
Wow.
And, is if I can spend an hour every day cleaning the house, and let me tell you, everyone walks in and like it's a joke. Everyone's like, this is insane. Who's your cleaner? Give her my number. Like it's really important to me to have the clean house. It's just I know at this point in my life, I'm the one that's going to be doing it.
The truth is, Avital, I'm still stuck on the no cleaning help where because you grew up with help. I grew up with help. When my kids were little, I had a lot of help and I gave that up. And even today, to this day, I'm like, I would like to increase it. So it is absolutely fascinating. I think there's an element of maybe you knowing that that's temporary, like that's not the long-term goal, right? Does that help?
It's a good question. I think about it a lot. First of all, I think that in Israel, like help is a little bit different. Like it's not,
Hmm.
I think that a lot of like help in general rests on foreign workers, and there aren't as many of those. So I
Hmm.
would say that's like the culture works differently. I think less people have help, so it
Hmm.
doesn't feel like the norm, that the fact that I don't feel crazy by the fact that I don't.
Right.
Um, I think, but I would say that I obviously see most women prioritizing that, like, above all else.
Yeah, like
I
that
think,
would be me, in all
yeah,
honesty.
which makes sense. I think for me, it's just I also am at a point where like I've now done it for like X amount of time that I also know my standards, and it just feels like even the times where I have had help, like I'm going back over things. Like it's just not even to the caliber most of the time that I need it. But
Uh-huh.
I've got into a routine now that it's like 1 hour in the morning, and in the evening my husband mostly does it. He does all the dishes. We didn't really discuss like the breakdown of labor, but he does all the washing up once I've done the cooking. He
Uh,
always takes out the trash. And I also think there's this like thing of like sticking to your word. Like I know I'm going to wake up every morning and the dishes are going to be done and he's going to take out the trash. And at the same time, he knows like I'm going to, make sure the fridge is stocked and that the food is on the table and there's dinner ready. And I
right,
think that because of that, he also cleans the kitchen like before he goes to bed because he knows how I need it to look in the morning in order to feel like refreshed. So I
right.
feel like when we've had those conversations, and it wasn't listen, when I met him, he was living with 12 other guys in the Mere with one bathroom. Like the standards were not there. And it wasn't even like I whipped him into shape. I just said to him, like, he could see that it would upset me. And so he just taught himself. So I feel like when we're working together for the same thing, like my favorite part of the day is when we're both cleaning up the kids' toys together and like getting the house set. And I just feel like there's something so special in like knowing that we're like managing it together.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like you said before, lowering expectations and also setting up a system with your spouse, right? I mean, it's teamwork. And if everybody there's an expectation of who's going to take care of what, and we stick to it, then it can work. Now, I think a big part also of I'm go back to thinking about the young mothers who may be listening and saying, wow, so it can be done, but I'm still overwhelmed or I still find it hard. A big part of your story, and it's important for us to notice this, is that you love what you do. And I think
Mm,
that's a big blessing. I think when we're talking about being able to do both, the parenting thing and the business or the career, right? Very oftentimes, not every mother is in love with their career. And I think it lends itself to a very miserable kind of situation. And the reason I'm saying this is because I think we're both of the belief that we need to encourage women to really, really go at it at something that they really love, and they know they're going to thrive, and the money's going to come. Like we said, then we can, increase the prices or do whatever it needs for the money to come, right? And obviously there's work in bitachon to be done, but not to limit ourselves, not to say, well, I'm going to go into speech therapy or physical therapy or da 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 da, because that's like the standard thing. And then I'm stuck being the breadwinner, but I'm completely miserable.
Yeah, I think those years when I tried out different internships in law, in journalism, in politics, I think gave me so much of an understanding of what I didn't want to do. I think it
Right.
took me a really long time to find my yes, but actually working through all those different internships and having those experiences gave me a chance to find something I was really passionate about. And
Right.
I would add, I think that I just like going back again to my parents, is just that like I saw them wake up every day and love what they do.
Yes.
And my mum is, 71 and still working, and I
Amazing.
just think that like, maybe her timetable's changed. Maybe she's gone down to 4 days a week and not full time. And my dad retired at 60 when he just wasn't enjoying it anymore and now has a ton of hobbies. And I think that was also really important. Like I had grown up seeing people that woke up every day with a zest for life. And I think that
Yes.
for me, I would just feel so sad if I didn't feel the same way about what I was doing every day.
Right. Yeah, it makes a big difference to say, you know what? Mommy loves what I do, what she does, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's okay for me to go out and, like you said, like my husband takes over when I have the speaking engagement, but you're so fulfilled, and that translates to your children. They're going to see a very fulfilled mother who is also a very present mother when she has to be present, which is, those hours from 3 to 7 on Shabbos and everything else, that we've mentioned before. So I think it's important to notice that.
yeah, I also think it's like when I am going out, like we tell my 3-year-old and she goes like Emma's going to I said originally Tel Aviv and she says like Tel Aviv, like Emma's in Tel Aviv. And like, like she's sad, but like she kind of associates that with like Emma's working. And I think
Mhm.
there's like, it's nice to be able to kind of have that already understanding from a young age. And I
Yeah.
also think I would say, like just going on what you said about like being fulfilled and that your children seeing that and being a better mum. I think that there was this period of time where my mum was changing jobs. And in the stock, I don't know, I want to say in the stock market and like that sort of business wealth management, they
Hmm.
don't want you to take your clients from one company to another. So they paid her 6 months called gardening leave.
Mm.
And it was the first time I didn't have a nanny. And she was kind of like the full-time homemaker for these 6 months. And she was miserable. And it was like, I think I was 11 years old, and I had this ability to understand that, like, my dream was to have a mum that was home,
Mhm.
but that wasn't her dream. And I guess it was like a really young age to understand that. But I
Yeah.
just watched her and I was like, she isn't happy. And it wasn't like, okay, she was crying, like, she was productive, she was doing things, but she thrives in an environment where she got on that train every morning at 6 a.m. and left for the day. And she felt like, yes, like I'm in my zone.
Hmm.
And I think that that really made her a more present mum when she was home for the weekends. And
Right.
so even though I'm doing it differently for my kids, what I did take from her was that if you don't feel fulfilled in what you're doing outside of the home, I think it's really hard to feel that way within the home. Or if you choose to
Yes.
be a full-time mum and say, listen, this is what I want to do, but it's not really fulfilling you, your kids feel that.
Yep.
And I think it's really important to understand, even when I speak to friends of mine who did have stay-at-home mums, they were like, well, they were miserable, not
Mm.
all the time, and they're like, well, we would never want that for ourselves. So I
Yeah.
think it's really important that whatever you do, you realize that your kids see through it. And so
100%.
whatever, you choose to embark on, whether it be a career or whether it be as a homemaker, make sure that actually it's what you're passionate about because your kids feel it.
Yeah, 100%. And you might be surprised at this, but it also sometimes translates to our financial statements because very often if a mom chooses to be a stay-at-home mom, but she doesn't really love that and she's not feeling fulfilled in a creative, purposeful way beyond motherhood, which again, motherhood in and of itself can be your creative, purposeful outlet. We're not knocking it, but for some women, they're just wired a little bit differently. And so I find that it tends to lend itself to a lot of overspending. You'd be surprised. And it's just like we're filling like a void because we don't have it's a void and it tends to happen. It's almost like if I can make that shift with clients sometimes, like, what do you really want to do? Like, what do you want to be busy with? And the minute we find that thing, is not only is it because they're starting to make money, it's because now they're not bored to death or unfulfilled and spending meaninglessly.
Yeah, and I also think it comes back to that phrase of like, what's your escape?
Yeah,
And I never quite understood it because it was like,
right.
well, what am I escaping from?
From.
Like, I don't want need to watch anything. I'm very happy with my life. And that's coming from someone that grew up with a ton of TV. Not interested, don't watch. People will tell me, you'll really love this series, you'd love this film. And I'm like, it's just not how I want to spend my time.
Right,
And I
either.
think it also comes back to like, shopping of like, I'm very decisive. If I go to a store, I'm there to buy something. I can't, I went shopping once with a friend and it was like, these glasses, maybe, no. And I was like, this just isn't for me. Like, if I've spent the time to go to a store, then I'm buying something. And if I'm not, then I'm not going. I'm not just like window shopping. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it just kind of comes to like, is our time spending us or are we spending our time? And I
Yes.
think that's like, the constant question of just like, am I making the most of the time that I have? Or is the time making the most of me, basically?
Yeah,
And I
I
just
love
think like when you're truly happy, there's no need for an escape. Like my escape is either just like listening to Shirin while I'm making challah or while I'm baking or listening to a podcast. And I think that's really what I just want to do in my spare time. I want to read, I want to spend time with my family, and I want to feel more educated.
same. We must be like soul
Yeah, we must be
sisters
the same
or
breed.
sisters from another
Exactly.
life.
Yeah, but that's really how I feel.
I do have to say there's like it does take there's so many things that take mental real estate, headspace, did the chicken come out of the freezer because I'm gonna finish with a client at 2, but I have to like, you know, cook it. And there has to be so much communication with your spouse because even though they want to try and help, by nature, most of them, I have to say, they don't have it in them to remember that the kid needs cheese sticks tomorrow morning in their lunchbox.
Absolutely.
And you could be with a client and that's what you're thinking about. And you're thinking about, I can't remember if the chicken came out of the freezer again, right? So that's without even thinking about the cleaning.
Right. But I think it's also understanding. I think that because was brought up with a nanny, and I see this amongst with all of my sisters, there was a passion from all three of us to be around for the kids. And we're all kind of doing that in our own way. But, recently I was at an event with working mums and we were talking about the juggle. And they were like, yeah, if we get to pick up twice a week, we feel like that's enough. If a grandparent, if a nanny is doing pickup. And I was like, no, every single day it's going to be me. And on the days it's not going to be me, which is, once a week, maybe it's going to be my husband. Wow. And I just think there was kind of like shock at saying like, that's where I'm putting, like, between 3 and 7, there's no meetings, there's no phone calls, there's, because if I'm not going to be there for my kids, who is? Right. And I think that it's understanding that it is another job. It is the hardest part of my day, but I don't want to hear about their day from anyone else. I only want to hear about it from them. And so it's just saying, like, if you really value this, you have to put in the boundaries in your schedule, in the way that you manage things, to make sure that you really aren't having any meetings. And I've run this business like this for 3 years now, and I've never really had a meeting between 3 and 7.
Right. Wow. That's unbelievable. And then there's another aspect that I think is not often talked about. You also have to price accordingly. You know what? Maybe what you need is a higher paying client or two, so that you don't have to hustle so much and can actually be free from 3 to 7, right?
Right. So in terms of, like, we didn't even discuss the business model, but my model is that I basically take on 8 clients a year. All of them pay between $25,000 to $30,000 for a rebrand. They're not being given anyone else. They're given all of my attention. I work on 2 clients at a time. Alongside that, I started doing consulting for people starting out their own businesses, because I kept getting this message in my inbox: hi, Avital, I see what you've built. Can I pick your brain? And, I didn't know the person. So I set up a consultancy saying, I'm going to take 4 consultations a week. I'm going to charge $350 for 45 minutes. If you want it, feel free to book here. And if you don't book, that's fine, but I'm not going to do it for free.
Right.
And now, I'm also having an income stream from doing all the public speaking. So absolutely, like, I think that it's pricing, making sure that your pricing is on point, and that there is no, it's take it or leave it. There's no negotiation. There's no, oh, can you do this? It's, this is the price. This is the amount of clients I take on. This is what I have room for. I only take on 4 consultations a week. I only do 2 keynotes a year. If you're interested, let's move ahead. If you're not, no problem. And that just takes belief.
It takes tremendous amount of belief. It takes tremendous amount of trust. It also takes confidence, and that it is possible, not fear. That it also takes, confidence with money, right? Rather than feeling like the money's not, if I don't take this client, then I'm not going to have the money, or, all these things. You evidently don't have these scripts. I want to go back to the business model for a second, because I really liked what I heard. I really, really did. These clients, they're with you for the year. You take 8 clients a year, but when they pay you the $30,000 package, you're with them 12 months.
No, it's a 3-month process. The first month works on something called the brand strategy. The second month works on creating a tone of voice, how the company speaks across all different types of mediums, be it by email, be it via social media, be it the content on their website. And then the third month is focused on the visual side of the brand identity. And I just did that for companies. And in the past year, I had founders who had exited their company, were going out on their own and saying, listen, I want a personal brand. I'm not wanting to be associated with the company anymore. I want to be charging for my keynotes. Right. I want to be lecturing. I want to be joining boards. I just want to look up, avitaleusgeld.com, and for me to be the brand. Right. And so I've really been focusing on building out personal brands for the past year, but it's the same system, 3 months, same price. Right. And that's really how it works. So it's 2 clients at the same time, and only 8 clients a year.
I love it. And do you have somebody in your team to help you with graphics and design and all that? Do you have people in your team?
So everyone is freelance, which means that for me, I can kind of have my babies and not have any projects at the same time that I'm worrying about, or having to take on clients that I don't really align with because I have other people's bills to pay. So actually these freelancers have been with me, for 4 years, and they're incredible. Most of them, I would say, are women who also have their own families. Wow. And it's this understanding of, I'm going to give you advance notice. I'm going to pay you better than anyone else is. But I'm also, I'm just not hiring because I want to be able to actually do things and not feel pressure to take on clients that I don't really align with. And I think that model works incredibly.
I love it.
it's really how I built the business.
Yeah, I love it because you can stay nimble.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's great. Now, we talked about how you saw your mother give advice and, be open, and you're in the same way. And yet you mentioned, sometimes people call for advice and here's my fee, for 45 minutes. Where does that one draw the line? And this might be even a personal question because I have the same thing. Where
Mm.
you can book me here for the hour and this is the price, and we'll do all the strategy and the everything that you want to achieve. But then there's also that tendency of, oh, but you're a friend of a friend, or you're part of the community of your what, da, 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 da. And it's something, and then I'll do it for free, right? So you have advice for us here?
So I think the first thing is that I had this strong kind of message in my brain that I did get from my mum, which is like, you have to know your no's in order to know your yes. And
Yeah.
kind of practicing that no as early as possible, be it no, I can't host, no, this doesn't work for me, no, I can't attend the simcha, no, I can't take on this project. It's a muscle. And the more times we use it, the easier it becomes. So I think that's the first thing that we need to
Mm-hmm.
understand.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that I would say that although I've been running the business, I hadn't really been writing publicly about running a business on LinkedIn or on any social media platform until about a year ago. When the
Mm-hmm.
war in Israel started, I started being more public, about Israel. And then I went to an event, which was for other LinkedIn, people that were writing about Israel, who were thought leaders. And I was like, right, I'm going to shift this from writing about Israel to actually writing about what it's like to be a woman in business, what it's like to run my own company. And that's really kind of where the inquiry started to come in. So
Wow.
that was really like the shift. And people were like, oh, is your business new? And I was like, no, I just wasn't as vocal on LinkedIn. Previously, I would write
Mm-hmm.
on LinkedIn if I had a new client, if there was a new case study, if I was speaking somewhere, but it wasn't really going all in. Now I write about 4 times a week on the platform and I grow it, and the following count is growing, yada, yada. And I think that then what happened once I became more out there is that's where this message sort of really started to come in around January time, being like, can I pick your brain? And I was just finding myself in these meetings and I was feeling really like, I don't want to be here. I don't know you. This is, actually, I'm not enjoying this anymore and I'm becoming resentful.
Right.
And so I spoke to a few friends who I thought would be in the same position, business owners who this must be happening to. And they said to me that they had this like text prepared with the link saying, and whatever, it was a great text. It just said, I've really got a lot going on right now. I'm only taking paid consultations. I'm really like happy for you and your enthusiasm. Here's the link. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't advertise that I was offering it. If you message me to say, can I pick your brain? I sent it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the shift that happened was that it started happening even more. So I then started saying, okay, this is like offering it. And then I added it even to my website. So now when you go on my website, you can see book Avital for like a one-on-one. So I think like it evolved and I have to get more comfortable with it as time went on. It was not easy for me. In
Yeah.
terms of choosing who to do it, I had a friend that just said straight up to me, if it's a friend, you do it for free. If it's a friend of a friend, that's already a paid consultation.
I
And
love it.
that's where I kind of just began to feel like, okay, no problem.
And if it's a
So I'll
LinkedIn
tell you,
stranger, it's also paid consultation.
absolutely. And I would tell you, I did 2 things. So first of all, to get the word out there, like, yes, people were inquiring, but I also wanted to give away 2 free consultations to different people. So I ran a giveaway and that really got the word out about it.
Mm.
And then I offered a discount code for anyone that had entered the giveaway. So that really kind of like was a really great way of doing it. I wrote about it on LinkedIn. You can look up the post for anyone that's interested. But I think that practicing that no, as I said, is like a really important part. And I'll just give a practical example.
Yeah.
I met someone at an event recently and she said, listen, I'm thinking about going out on my own. I've been following you on LinkedIn. You seem really impressive. And I'd met her a few times. We were not particularly close. I sat with her for 20 minutes. I gave her all my tips of what I thought at the networking event. I didn't speak to anyone else. I focused on her. When other people came over to me, I stayed focused on her. I gave her, she was writing down what I was saying. And then I got a message saying, would we be able to go for lunch? And I said, no problem. Here's the link, making sure that it was clear that this would now be paid.
Wow.
Because, you're not even a friend. I'm very happy to give you advice. We've met, no problem. But now, if you want more, and I think it's just the more times you do it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I have the same thing. And you know what? I saw somebody, I changed it instead of a pick my brain session, it's borrow my brain. So I actually have it
Oh, I
as,
love that.
yeah, borrow my brain. So I'm giving it over to you. I know you're,
And I also think, in terms of like, as I said, like if it's someone from the seminaries that I've been speaking at, people that are becoming more religious, that is a no-brainer because it's a
yeah,
different conversation. But if it's,
exactly.
listen, I'm launching a business, can I talk to you about how to manage that? That is not the same kind of category.
Of course,
So
of
one is a
course.
no-brainer. It's free. You know, you're my friend's kid. You know, you're looking to enter the industry, no problem. One
Yeah.
is I've set up a company and I want to see how you do it so I can copy it. That's a paid consultation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope listeners are getting the message, because we got here by talking about the fact that sometimes you have to know whatever you're doing is of tremendous amount of value, and you have to own it and quote it appropriately. And if you want to have that life where you have time for your family and you can afford, to that your husband is not bringing in an income, you have to price appropriately without any qualms or trepidations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. Now, when you mentioned, Avital, and I'm going back to an earlier piece of this conversation, that your parents gave you an allowance and you had to budget from that. You mentioned also that you were the youngest. You almost grew up like an only child, I would say, right? Because there's you're the one after you is 10 years older than you said,
Yeah.
right? Do you think they were the same way with your two older sisters? Or was it something that they
I
learned later on, like, oh no, we better teach a little bit of financial management to our child? Or do you think they were better? They were the same with the three of you?
we all like do not spend above our means.
Wow.
Wouldn't dream of it, like I said. So I imagine that like the same values were kind of
Probably.
entrenched into all of us.
Right.
I think with me it was probably the most practical. Like I'm not sure they would have given them the allowance in the same way. But even
Uh-huh.
now, like I had a friend when I was in London in the summer, and she was saying to me, she has an 11-year-old girl, it's her oldest girl, and now she's entering high school. And she keeps saying, you know, I'm going for coffee with friends. And I just said, do this. It was great for me. It really worked. And she was like, it's been a game changer. So I think, you know, like it was something that really set me up for life. And I really think that parents today should absolutely still be doing it. You shouldn't be telling your child how to manage the money, but you should be telling your child, this is the amount, use it as you wish. And slowly they understand what things cost. And
Right.
that's, I think it was just, I think we've all been brought up with those values. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we all have a very similar attitude to the way that we spend and how we budget and how we think about money kind of ahead of time.
Yeah. I love it. And it sounded from an earlier piece of the conversation that your husband is pretty comfortable talking about money, which is also, sometimes it's rare to see in a couple. It sounded like you're both from early on in your
Mm-hmm.
relationship, you were very comfortable being open and transparent.
I think A, yes, and I think B, it's practical. You know, he's German, his parents are Russian, and I think that there's just needs to be like I saw my parents kind of have constant check-ins. They would sit together after work, they would both come in around 7 o'clock, and they before the kids would enter the room. And I always thought this was a little bit structured, and I probably still do. And I don't really do it the same way with my husband, but it's something that I've mirrored in my own way, which I'll explain. They had this meeting together to catch up, to go through their diaries, what did the week look like? And I saw that as being really important. And likewise, you know, I often sit with my husband and we basically make time. I would say like 3 to 4 times a week to say, what are we focusing on right now? Where's our pricing going? You know, what does this cost? Where's the money going? What events do we have going on this week? And there's constant like communication, making sure that we're on the same page. And I
Yeah.
think that with us, like we probably over communicate. And I think that that's like means that there's not really room for error or
Yeah.
like, oh, is that really what they're thinking? And I think that's a really important thing that I would say that couples need to do. Get
Fundamental.
comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fundamental. We call it a money date. I tell people, call it a money date, call it a money meeting, call it a money party, whatever rocks your boat, but it has to happen, and it has to happen consistently. No exceptions. It just has to happen. Everybody needs to know how the cash is moving around, how we want it to move, and be on the same page.
Yeah, I just think there's no one wins from like not having a certain conversation. I
Yeah,
think that like if something's bothering you, it only gets worse.
right.
And therefore, like the sooner you discuss it and make sure you're on the same page, or even from a different page, that's also good to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I would say about the shift dating is just like have those hard conversations as early as possible.
Yeah.
And once you kind of do that, then the chance to really fall in love and make sure like that everything else aligns. But I think having
Wow.
those hard conversations really early on, making sure that you can fall for the person because the values are there is like a really important part.
Yeah, you mentioned something really interesting, the word values, which I always talk about the fact that as you're starting this journey as a couple to getting comfortable talking about money and starting to have these money dates regularly, you also have to go back to what are your values? Because maybe you talked about all that when you were first dating or first married, but you've never gone back and revisited. But guess what? You might find that you're spending money in ways that are completely not aligned with your values. And that's going to cause a lot of inner turmoil and tension. And it's just a misalignment. So it has to be a constant part of the conversation as well. Is the money going to go here? And if so, is that exactly what we value? And it's going to help shape your trade-offs, because we're always going to have to make trade-offs no matter what.
I think you're so right. And I remember when I was out with a friend once and I wanted to buy a pair of like a new pair of trainer sneakers. And she said to me, like, aren't you going to call your husband to check that you can buy them? And I was really shocked. And I was like, no, because my husband trusts the way that I spent. I just cannot even imagine this idea of like this, like it kind of comes up a lot when you're reading like certain magazines, and it like says like, oh, she hides the receipts.
Oh gosh.
And like, she pretends that like she hasn't bought X, or like he hides, whatever he's buying. And I'm just like, how can you build a marriage and relationship which is based on trust if you're hiding things? I never ever purchase something unless I think my husband would be aligned. And I think that's the thing. And I always say to him, there's someone that I go see, it's like kind of a healer every quarter, and she just makes sure that everything's like in check for my business. It's very non-me. I met her on an Oman trip, separate story. And I said to my husband, like, do you not feel like ever like this is a lot of money that we're putting towards this? And he's like, you come back a different person, and I trust the way that you spend. And I just think that like having that belief in each other and the way that you're both spending money, knowing that you're going to look through the credit card bill and no one's going to get a surprise, like do that as early on as possible. Do not start a marriage, with doing anything that isn't that.
Yeah, agreed. Avital, this has been such gold. I'm so appreciative of this interview. I always crown my guests with what I like to call Jewish Money Matters fill in the blanks. And this is the part of the show where I give you an open-ended sentence and you finish it with the first thing that comes to mind. You game for it?
I'm game.
Awesome. All right. The first one is, when I give Meiser or tzedakah, I like to give to
female charities.
Oh, wow. Can you give us an example?
I think I would just say, like, on a practical level, I remember my mum took me to this event once where it was all women lunch for a charity, and it was really amazing. There was a fashion show, and afterwards I said to her, like, surely they would have raised so much. And she was said, probably not, because none of the husbands were there, and husbands are in the power to like give the money, not the women, not the wives. And it really kind of made me think that if wives aren't in the Jewish world, let's say, if wives aren't in the position to give like, the maximum amount of money, then all girls orphanage is not going to be the type of thing that's going to appeal to a man. So therefore, if I am a woman and I do have the ability to kind of pay it forward, and I told this to my husband, I really would love to focus on organizations that probably aren't going to get as much money given to them because they're only focusing on women. And he's very aligned with it. And obviously there are things that he says to me, I want to put money towards this, but on the whole, we try and focus on like female situations and organizations.
There's such a powerful lesson right there. First of all, this idea that a woman doesn't have as much ownership to decide where the money, the Meiser money or the tzedakah money is going. It's also scary. Like, it should be a couple's conversation, and there should be access to that account. Like, I know my husband trusts me. If he sees I send money out from the account that we have designated for this, like, he doesn't bat an eye, right? Because he knows kind of the things that I value, and he's okay with them, and I know the kinds of things that he values, kind of causes. And then again, the second part is this part, having that ongoing respect and trust and conversation. So very, very powerful. All right. Next one is, I'd love to make more money because
I want to be able to help more people. It's that feeling of someone coming to you and saying, I really want to do this and I need, a charitable donation, and being like, I'm in a position to help do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you probably saw your parents be very charitable. I mean, you said you saw them going to a lot of events. So you definitely grew up with this.
And I think the other thing that I found funny, sorry, is just more like going back to like the Chanel bag thing. There was sometimes they would pay the price of the dinner and not attend, and tell them like we're not attending. And they were like, we just don't need to be everywhere, and we don't need it. Or they built things for schools that no one. And I just think it's this feeling of just be understated. You don't always need the plaque with your name that said, this family donated it. Right. It's okay to just give the money and not everyone know about it.
Right. And I remember learning from the Lubavitcher Rebbe that, there is a merit to this, which is if it's going to drive and
And make
drive
other people do it.
others,
Yeah.
right, inspire others to give, then that's an instance where we do put it. But other than that, there is really no reason to do it. Something I wish I'd learned about money growing up, although I have to say you learned pretty good things.
Yeah, honestly, I feel Baruch Hashem very lucky. There's nothing I feel like I was lacking in terms of money.
Mm.
Like I really feel like they gave us amazing lessons about how to manage it, how to make sure you never get into debt, all of those things.
Wow. Sounds amazing. And I love that you're paying forward all these things. I know you talk to the girls more about like business and all that, but the personal finance side, I'm sure comes up. And if not, call me. I'll be right there with you. We'll do it
Exactly.
together. Money, spiritual or physical?
Spiritual or physical? Explain, what does that even mean? For it to
What
be
do you think
spiritual
it
or for it
is?
to be
What does it
physical?
mean? It's a spiritual thing? Is it a physical thing? It could be both, by the way. Both is my answer. I'll tell you right off the bat. But for some
Wait,
people,
why
it's
why do you feel like it's both? And that will help me answer my answer.
oh, sure. I'm happy to share. Well, everything in the physical world is spiritual. So that's number one. But money being it's interesting. Money being the symbolism of like the epitome of physicality happens to have a tremendous spiritual power in and of itself. There's nothing in the world that we can say this is a physical world that is imbued with spirituality, and all we're doing is using the money to reveal that spirituality. So that's why for me it's both.
I'll stick with your answer. I'll say it's both.
Ah, there you go. Something I splurge on unapologetically is,
Ooh, good, modest dresses.
oh, nice. Do you know all the good spots in Israel, or do you have to buy when you go travel?
Um, I think that first of all, I'm like a big person, a big believer in like invest once, invest well.
Oh, I'm the
Um,
same way. Like literally, like I buy like a dress and it will be, I might spend a lot more than other people, but I'll
yeah,
be using it for a long time.
exactly. So I feel like that's really important. And I just know like the brands, sometimes in Israel, sometimes in America, sometimes in London, that like, really are just like very well made that will last like time and make me feel great. So I think that's
Yeah.
really important.
I love that. I'm very similar. All right, spender or saver?
I think a healthy mix of the two.
Do you also invest, Avital, or you haven't started investing? How do you feel about investing?
So I think we just make sure, like in terms of like our money, we have like a certain amount in Israel that's going towards like our pension, a certain
Mhm.
amount that actually like is a fund called like a Karen Hishtana, which you can access after 6 years, and if not, then it's like a tax-free investment that continues to go up.
Right.
And then we also have like our healthcare, which means that we get money for our maternity leave and stuff like that. So I feel like there's a lot of money that's being saved all the time, but it's not
hmm
like invested into stocks and shares at this point.
And the good news is it sounds like these things happen automatically, right? Which is
Exactly.
really the
Yeah.
trick to this. Uh-huh.
And also like
Today,
a good finance manager. I think that's like a great investment to have someone that you trust that's like a finance manager and also an accountant.
wait, did you say you have one? I missed the first part.
Yeah. So I have the finance manager and I also have an accountant, and it's like two separate things. And I
Nice.
find that like really just, saying like, where do you want to be? If you want to buy a house, what do we need to do to get there? And that was a great thing.
Good for you that you did that. And assume you started that relationship after you got married?
Yeah. We like chose him together and it's been like a great person to
Wow.
invest with.
Wow. Good for you. Sometimes it takes a little bit of upfront work to find the right person, but it's definitely worth it. It's like finding the right match.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. I'm glad you did that. Today, I'm most grateful for.
Finding a husband that really gets me,
Ah,
like I don't think it was like obviously I had the faith that it would happen, but for me, like, whenever I'm going to do an event, he's always there being like, you've got this, so proud of you. And I
yeah.
just think that I just saw that with my own parents. Like my dad was my mum's biggest cheerleader,
Mhm.
and I just always worried like, would I be able to find the same thing? And he really, even if it's been a really, even if I've left the kids crying with him, and it's like a really challenging situation, I'll still arrive at that event, and there'll still be a message being like, so proud of you, babe, you've got this. And I
Right.
just think like that's like I just feel like without that, I wouldn't be able to do what I do today.
Your parents must be so proud of the two of you. I hope they are.
Yeah, they really are. They've been both my in-laws, my parents. I feel very lucky with them both.
Baruch Hashem, thank God. I'm finally Avital Eusgeld, and I believe Jewish Money Matters because
It tells you how to use your money wisely.
mm, mm, very nice, very nice. Avital, thank you so much for this time, this interview. So much wisdom in here. I can't wait to air it to the world, and I so appreciate it. I'm so glad we got to become friends on LinkedIn and get to know each other a little bit more. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I think this is like such an important podcast, such an important conversation. And,
Thank
thank you for
you.
making it happen.
Tell us where we can find you, where we can connect with you. Where do we do that?
On LinkedIn.
That's it. People, if you're
Yeah.
not on LinkedIn, I have to say I wasn't. Did you know I wasn't on LinkedIn like 2 years
You
ago?
did tell me that. No, I also have a website, HiPitched.com, which is, also does a great job. But in terms of like, thought leadership, daily ideas, things like that, it really is only on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Avital, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.